Welcome to the Nuts and Bolts of Camp Philanthropy training. As you know, my name is Naomi, and I just want to share that this work bringing Team Philanthropy to camps is particularly exciting to me because not only do I have a background in Team Philanthropy, but also, not only do I have a background with philanthropy personally, but also I'm a big camp person. I was a division head at Camp Vermont in the Berkshires for 2 summers. And when I started at JCFN, we were just beginning to bring this program model that we work with in year-round programs to our work in summer camps. And so I've had the opportunity over the last 4 years to head up that work in bringing this program model to summer camps. So it brings together my 2 passions. So we've done some introductions, and now I just want to take a few minutes to lay out what we're going to spend the next hour or so on. So we're going to go through a timeline of what it looks like to get this program off the ground and to run it during the summer. We're going to talk about what a Team Foundation really does, and also how you can integrate it into the camp culture. We're going to go over the program guide, the materials that we're providing to you to run this program during the summer, and we're going to cover some basics of grant making. I hear that you both have some experience in this area. Generally, we found that most of the folks that work with us at camp have more experience in the Jewish values pieces and Jewish education pieces and working with teams, so we want to make sure that we focus a little bit on grant making. And if you have any questions along the way, just interrupt me. So first, for a little timeline, the timeline is based on is an outline basically of what you and the other folks in your camp who are involved with this program. The guide for when you should accomplish different parts of the program. Obviously, the specific amounts on some of these items is going to depend on when your camp session starts and when your campers and staff get there, so you should adjust accordingly. First, you're actually accomplishing the first thing, which is to attend a training on the Team Philanthropy program. And the next step is to identify 5 to 6 local nonprofits and distribute the request for proposals to start the process going with the organizations that you're going to be able to present to the teams over the summer. It's also really important before camp to finalize when the Team Foundation is going to meet within the overall camp schedule. And then also following this call, in the next week or 2, I'm going to be sending you by email the grant proposals that we've collected from 3 Jewish national and international organizations that may also be options that you may want to bring to your teams this summer. And I'll tell you more about those organizations a little later on. And then during June and July, I always like to remind folks that you're probably not the only one not the only staff member that's going to be involved with this program. So once your staff get to camp, to orient them and train them in the program also so that they can support you, whether it be on logistics or content during the summer. To be sure that you confirm at least 2 site visits with the organizations that you're presenting the teams with. And then also just a reminder that I'm available, after this call and throughout the whole summer if you want to connect with me, if you have any questions or if you want to be directed for any additional resources and parts of this process. And then during July, most camps are up to the final arrangement for site visits, including transportation, which can be tricky. Actually those teams on the site visits. And then we've encouraged camps to help yourself and to help us publicize the great work that we're doing in this program. So I'd encourage you to take the time to either have your teams or yourself write a blog post or an article. We're happy to post it on the JCFN blog. If your camp has a blog, sometimes FJC will pick these things up. And also to get out the word about what you're doing on social media. So we hope that you'll be our partners in that this summer. And if you could use any support in that, we have a full-time communications associate here at JCFN who I'll be connecting with you to during the course of the summer. So you can also use her as a resource in thinking about this. And then finally, after camp, You can see these are in big letters because it's really important to make sure that at the end of the summer or following the summer, you inform all of the nonprofits of the status of their grant, and that you actually issue those grant checks that they're accepting. That sounds silly, but it is a pertinent reminder, as I've seen in some camps. So that's a general timeline, and we're going to go into some of those pieces. Any questions before I move ahead? So you can see here that I want to share some really encouraging statistics from the program evaluation that we conducted in 2013 that really gets to the core of why we do this work. And this is also posted on our website. I'll paste the link for you here so you could take a look and actually in a more readable size. But I'll pull out a few highlights for you, which is to say that 79% of staff and 90% of camp directors felt that this program had a positive impact on the overall camp experience, and that 81% of campers felt that the program includes their connection to their Jewish values, such as Tikkun Olam, tzedakah, and philanthropy. And so this is from a full report that we did during the 2013 year that encouraged us to keep with this working camp. And you can take a closer look. And this is a great resource to use if you want to explain to any of your stakeholders why this program is important to your camp.
Of course you do.
So what is a team foundation anyway? So you both have Jacob has some direct experience in this, and Barry, I know you're working with Sarah, who also has direct experience, but at the risk of being repetitive, a team foundation is a group of 15 to 20 teams that goes 12 to 25 teams, I just flipped this, that goes through a 15 to 20 hour process, a group philanthropic process, where they explore Jewish values and general values related to giving. They develop a mission statement as a group to guide their giving. They review grant proposals from real nonprofits. They go on site visits to learn more about those nonprofits firsthand. And then they use the process of consensus building to come to a decision about where to give their grants. And finally, they participate in celebration and sharing, hopefully with the broader community, where they get to share and contextualize this experience. And all of this work and the work that GTFN does with over 120 Jewish philanthropy programs throughout the country, we see team foundations, which teaches about grant-making, which is specifically giving money, as a tool for engaging people in exploring Jewish values and what it means to be part of the community. And so these are the main goals of the Team Foundation at your camp. They're to teach basic philanthropic principles and giving based on Jewish values, to provide a forum to explore personal values around giving, to develop team leadership and teamwork skills, to enable group decision-making, and to create a culture of giving at your camp. And so we've been working with camps for a number of summers, and through these experiences, we've really learned that Jewish team philanthropy has a three-pronged impact at summer camps. It not only impacts the teams in our programs, but also the staff, who can learn a great deal as facilitators, and the camp as a whole in developing a culture of giving. I'm just going to check in for a minute. Barry, are you still there?
I am. My computer is doing something slightly strange. So I'm still here. I don't know where my website went. Maybe I'll click it.
But you're hearing
me. It just reloaded the page. Yeah, absolutely. There we go.
I was hearing some background noise. I'm not sure from who, so I may ask you to, are there kids playing outside somewhere?
Oh, me.
You?
The JCC. Yeah, I'll mute mine. I'll mute.
So mute for now and unmute if you have any questions, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. All right. So I just went through kind of an overview of the goals and the process. And GTFN provides all the materials that you will need to go through the process that I just enumerated, and to accomplish the goals that we discussed. And we do that through our program guide specifically for camps, which is broken down into the 8 tasks that you see here in front of you. And each task has a cover sheet which lays out the main learning goals for the task and then offers 3 to 4 activities that you can use to meet those goals. And so I would recommend that you review the activities to decide which will work best for your camp, taking into account the age of your campers and the specific culture and environment of your camp. And the reason why we organize the program guide this way is because we know that every camp is really different, and every camp and every camper has different needs. And so you're welcome to pull pieces. You're welcome also to take pieces from each of these activities and to create your own activities based on the learning goals, and also to use other samples from our website, which I'll tell you more about. Actually, I'll take you there right now. I'm just going to share my browser with you so you can see for a minute what else we have to share on our website. So the program guide is here, which you should have received a link to when I sent the email about this call, and you can see all the different pieces. But I'll point out that in the general resources section, if you click on the resources tab of our website, you're also able to access resources in a whole bunch of different categories. So you can essentially say, for example, well, let's see, on task 3, building consensus, I don't love any of these materials. Let's see what else GCFN has here. And you can go to resource type and put in consensus and search it, and then come up with a list of other materials. And you'll notice that sometimes there's overlap. Sometimes we've used things that are provided on the website singularly within our other materials, but you can see here that there's a host of other things that were categorized under consensus, for example. We also have a page which I'll paste into your browser, which I'll paste into the chat, which you can use, which has specific camp resources, and we hope that you will share with us any materials that you create this summer as well, so that we can add it to our bank of resources. So I'm going to put that in right now. So any questions about accessing resources or materials? All right.
I do have one question.
Go ahead.
On the website where the original one that was emailed to us, I was trying to access the full program guide, and it was the exact same as the introduction one.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know if that's a bad link or if that is a problem on my end. But
I will check into that right after the call, and I'll email you to once it's up correctly, and then make sure that you're able to access it. Thanks for letting me know. That is obviously.
No problem. Is the full program guide just all of the other tasks and appendices combined?
It is, yeah.
Okay. I figured. I wanted to let you know that the link was incorrect.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, we posted it as one resource as well as individually, because we know that folks like to access these things in different ways. So you might be the type who will go through the whole program before the summer starts, or you may be doing it as you go. But I'll make sure that link is correct. Thank you. Great. Okay. So I just want to talk a little bit about scheduling. In our experience, with both camps and other types of programs, we've learned that it really takes 15 program hours to do this, to cover all the material adequately and to run a successful program. And so that's why we've set it at that, hour recommendation. And I'll add that those hours don't include the transportation to and from your site visit location. But the beauty of the program is that you can allocate those hours in whatever way works for your camp and your team. So some camps have actually run the whole program in 2 to 3 seminar days. Others have devoted an hour most days to it, and really anything in between. So I encourage you to work with your camp administrators and to decide what will work best in your setting. And I'm just curious to hear from you guys. We were going to take a poll, but since the group is so small, you can just let me know. Do you know what your plan is so far for the summer in terms of when the group will be meeting?
For us, we're going to do it as our Friday Shabbat programming. So we're going to do some of it at orientation, a little bit more at our late stay, but generally it's going to be about an hour every Friday.
Great.
And we're having our site visits come to us.
Okay, so you're going to have organizations visit you rather than go to the site.
Yeah, we're keeping our request for grants have gone out to people within our Jewish Federation family. Each different subset under our JFed is able to put at most 2 in. So it's all going to be part of our family's organizations this year.
Okay, interesting. And those RFPs went out already?
Yep, they're due June 5th.
You're ahead of the game. Great. Jacob, what about you in terms of, do you know when the teams are going to meet?
I haven't been in contact with my program director yet, so I don't know exactly when. But the way we did it last year and then 2 years ago when I was in, it was just a couple times a week. And it was usually during our Chofesh, which is kind of free time for the rest of the camp. We would just pull the counselors in training out of it, and we would meet just several times a week throughout the summer.
Okay, great. All right, so it seems like you're both on your way to figuring that out or doing it how it's been done in the past at Livingston. So after you feel confident in understanding what a Team Foundation is all about and the larger accomplishments is the time to put together these logistical pieces. So this is just a list of questions that you should be able to answer in the coming week or two as you figure out how it's all going to fit in. In our experience, particularly about questions 3 and 4 on this list, if there are going to be other staff members who are involved with the program, we recommend that you provide some kind of orientation to them beforehand. It's a great thing to include staff in during orientation week, potentially to ask for some time to do that during the orientation schedule. It's also, can be really interesting for folks to have some kind of experience with some of this material, even as a training opportunity. I've recommended before that you might try out consensus within the larger camp group that is involved with this program, because it can be a leadership development experience for them and then help inform the work that you do with the team. So that's just one example of how you can bring this in general into your camp culture. And just as a note, these slides will be available afterwards. We'll post them on our website on that link that I just put in the chat so that you can share, if you're training any other folks in this, you can use these slides as well. All right, so as you look through this list about how many teams are going to be in your group, do you need to run multiple cohorts, how can you prepare other camp staff, which staff members are going to be involved, when and where will the teams meet, and when will site visits occur? Yeah, I heard a little bit from Barry about your answers to some of these questions. It sounds like you really have things figured out over there. Jacob, do you have any idea about how many teams you're going to be working with? And what other staff are going to be involved? Maybe you could share with us.
There are 23 counselors in training this year at our camp, so it'll just be one cohort. I'm not sure about other staff aside from our Hadracha, which is our counselor in training program unit head, who obviously have to be on board with it so that we can pull them out of other activities that they might be scheduling. The only other staff members I can think of involving would be our program director, just so that he can program around it, and then some staff to drive our group to the site visits when we get to that point. we usually stick with Cincinnati for our organizations just because it's easy to do one site visit and go to both of them because it is an hour drive to Cincinnati. And then as for where in the past it's been in our staff lounge, it's like a good break for the Hadricha who are working hard every day, get them a chance to relax in the air conditioning while we're working on this program.
Nice. They'll really look forward to it then. Great. So, and I'll just say, sorry, that if I can be helpful in answering any of these questions, you know, as you meet with other folks involved, please let me know. And I think you're right on target, Jacob, with making sure that the program director and the CIC staff is really on board with this program. Are those returning staff members or new to camp, you know?
We have a new program director, and our Hadricha staff member is returning.
Okay. Well, if anyone wants to have any orientation time with me, I'm also available for that. Great. So I just want to take a little time to reflect on your own experience and how it relates to this program as the folks that will be running this. We've kind of broken down the work that we do into these 3 areas of skill sets. As you can see in front of you, they overlap. And those areas are knowledge of Jewish texts and values, facilitation skills with groups of teams, and an understanding of grant making and nonprofits. And, you know, we all fall, ideally we all fall right in the middle and have skills in all of these areas. But I think in general, you know, folks have more comfort or less comfort with different areas. So I'm just curious, could you share which of these you feel most comfortable with? And I'll share first, so no one's shy, that I'm most comfortable in the facilitation skills with groups of teens realm. My previous things actually as a clinical social worker. So well, what about the rest of you?
Mine is most strongly with the facilitation of teens as well. The knowledge in Jewish texts and values I do decently with. One of my staff is also a rabbinical student who will be going into his final year. So what I don't have, he does. The grant making is where I struggle the most, but that's where Sarah is very good.
Great. I love how you bring up, and that's, you know, usually what I recommend during this phase is to make sure you can bring in other people who have skills in areas where you may not. So that's perfect. Yeah. Jacob, I don't see your camera. Are you still there? Uh-oh, we may have lost him. All right. We'll give him a minute to rejoin us.
Okay.
Hello. Sorry, mine went down for a minute.
Oh, no problem. Do you feel comfortable sharing which of these areas you're most strong in?
Yeah, I saw that before it went down. Hold on, I'm pulling it back up. My strengths are in knowledge of Jewish texts and values. I worked a lot with that over the summer, last summer, and through this school year at the Hillel at my on my campus, and I'm working this summer as the Judaics director. So I'm pretty confident in those abilities. And then I guess my next would be facilitating discussions with teens. I was a leader in NIFTY, which is another Jewish youth group. I heard various issues in BBY. She was a director for BBYO. So I was very involved in NIFTY, so I worked a lot with leading discussions with peers, and I was also a student teacher at my temple, so I discussed with not quite the age group we're working with now, but I actually had some of them as my students at my synagogue back home, so I have worked with them in past times.
Right, so you have some relationships to build on, which is always really useful for facilitating groups of teens. And while you dropped off for a second, Barry had mentioned that she was going to be using other folks in her camp community who have skills in these other areas, to help supplement those areas. And so, I recommend that. I think mainly if there are areas that you feel weak strong in, which seems to be the grant making area, just to spend extra time making sure that you prepare those items of the curriculum. It's easy to go in, off the cuff with something you're familiar with, and less so if you're less familiar. And also to bring in the right people in your camp community who have the experience in specific areas. And we've seen lots of examples of that in camp. I'll share one example that you may not think of. There are a number of camps that have development directors as a role, and then for some camps, the director of the camp may be in the development role. And so many camps bring that person in for an introduction to grant making, because they have direct experience with what that means, as in their role. So I just recommend that you kind of think broadly about who might have that experience within your camp community, or your community in general.
I believe my camp director actually graduated a few years ago from Indiana University with a minor in nonprofit studies. So we do have that person from campus, and he's working with us as well.
Wait, who's that? Who's the director there?
Aaron Slavin.
Oh, yes, you're right. He does have that background. And he actually ran the program himself last summer, right? Was he the facilitator when you were in it?
No, 2 years ago he was not. This past summer he was.
Okay. So you both have administrative with a lot of experience. Great. So I won't bother you with actually filling it. Well, you know what? Go ahead. In front of you now is a poll that asks about your experience with grant making. This is your personal experience, so just take a minute and fill it in. I'll fill it in as well. Great. So while none of us have facilitated the Theme Foundation, even though I teach people to do this, I actually not facilitated a group myself. We all have some experience with the grant world, which will definitely inform the work that you do this summer. So as I said before, we like to take some time during the camp training to focus on the grant making, because as we see among this group, as well as what we hear from folks in the general field, this is the area that you're least likely to have experience with. So I want to focus, I want to just zoom in and make sure that we clarify the one point that is sometimes fuzzy to people. People use philanthropy to include a lot of different things. And here at JCFN, when we say philanthropy, we always mean the giving of grants. We're not talking about fundraising, which is sometimes confused. So, I just always like to drive that point home. And yeah, we'll move ahead. So if you haven't already done so, which I know you have, Barry, the first step is to contact local nonprofits. So a good rule of thumb is to start contacting them at least a month before camp starts. So that puts this timing as usually perfect for most camps to start making that outreach. And in order to do so, you'll need to send them a request for proposals. And JCN has a sample request for proposals on that website that we mentioned in those materials, which lays it out for you really simply. And so you should be able to use that and fill in the specifics about your camp in order to reach out to organizations that you've identified. So the question is, where do you look for these organizations? So first of all, look for your own camp connections, whether that be through your director, through your board, through organizations that your camp has worked with on volunteer projects, for example. Use your personal connections if you have them in the nonprofit world. You might seek out the local federation. It sounds like, Barry, you're focusing on federation's work. So that is, often a good connection to nonprofits, because they work with a lot of nonprofits. And then also in some local communities, there are actually team philanthropy programs. and so if that's relevant, and if you want to check, there's a list of our programs on our website. The link is up on the slide now, and they may be able to connect to the organizations that are already familiar with the Teen Foundation process, which can be helpful because you don't have to explain kind of from the beginning this work that we're doing with teens. And then the next important pieces are to check out the location work, especially if you're going on site visits, that they actually have the capacity for site visits. So sometimes we hear from organizations that they don't allow teens younger than a certain age to their site, or that they can't take 23 of them. So check that out. And then finally, there's teens. So we have seen some camps over the years reach out to the teams that are going to be in this process before the summer through like a survey and just ask them about which issue areas are interesting to them and use that to guide their collection of the 5 or 6 grant proposals from local nonprofits. So that's definitely, an option if your camp has contact with the organizations before the summer. With the campers before the summer. And then also we can use what JCFN has gathered from this field to learn about what teams are interested in. So you see here that we have conducted a worldwide survey of teen foundations at a number of times over the years. The last time that we did so was during the 2013, 2000. You know what, Barry, can I just ask you to mute again? I'm hearing a lot of background noise. Great, thanks. So that was during the 2013-2014 school year, and we learned the following, that this list is of the top issue areas that teens were interested in. So they're drawn to organizations that work with youth, that work in education, that address issues having to do with special needs, chronic illness, and poverty. So these are just this is kind of a guide in the absence of being able to reach out to teens that you might be working with, that these are pretty good bets for things that teens are drawn to when they have like, a wide variety of choices. If you're interested also in learning more about the results of GPFN study, we have that on our website on our homepage. It's called Where Did the Money Go? And there are some other interesting findings about what's interesting or where the teams were drawn to giving, where teams in our CLT to over the last program year. So I welcome you to take a look at that. All right, so once you've decided which organizations you're going to reach out to, it's time to distribute the request for proposals. Grant-making institutions often release an RFP widely and receive, a number of grant proposals in return. But because most of your teen foundations are not yet popular grant-making institutions, I encourage you instead to identify a couple of nonprofits in the area that, for the reasons we discussed before, you suspect would be interesting to your teams, and to reach out directly to them. I suggest making a phone call first and making that connection with a development person there, and then sending them the form. You'll definitely have a higher likelihood of getting a response if you make that phone call before you send the letter. And in general, part of the work that we want our teams to do is also to learn about what a request for proposal is, and that's why you can see that the form in the materials for your use as well as for teams to learn about them. And in general, request for proposals should include an introductory note explaining what this group is, guidelines for project eligibility. You're accepting proposals only in this area or for this amount of money are 2 examples of eligibility. Important dates such as when you need to be notified, when you need to receive the grant proposals by, and when they should expect to hear back from you. And also contact information for whoever's the lead on this at camp. So when you look at the form that we provided, there are spaces to fill in your specific camp's information. So just make sure you look at it carefully and fill in the appropriate information before you send it out. And if I didn't say this before, the sample request for proposal is in the appendix, one of the appendices of the program guide. And you'll see that it is quite short. We sometimes hear from program leaders that they're concerned that our organization is really going to fill this out for relatively small dollars. But in general, we found that the proposal is pretty modest. It's not going to take them a lot of time. And folks are usually pretty interested in the fact that teams are going to learn about their organization and that they're interested in their organization and they're really happy to work with you on it. So don't fear about that. So I mentioned before that this summer, as well as last summer, GTFN collected a few grant proposals from national and international nonprofits, and it's completely up to you if you want to bring these grant proposals to your teams or have them focus only on the local organizations. The organizations that we're going to be distributing proposals from are Matan, which works with Jewish students with special needs, Innovation Africa, which brings Israeli innovation to African villages, and Leka Israel, which is the National Food Bank of Israel. And you could choose to use one or two of these proposals, or all of them, or none of them. But part of the reason why we solicited these is it takes away a little bit of administrative work from you guys, because I know it can be a bunch of work in collecting grant proposals. And then mainly because it expands teams' understanding of the nonprofit world, so they can understand local need and also something about need in Israel or the global community or national organizations. And it also opens up a conversation about Jewish organizations. Some camps that are in more remote areas have a hard time finding Jewish organizations to present as options to their teams. So if that is a conversation that you want to have, then you can present some of these options in order to have that conversation. It also opens up the conversation about local versus global versus Israel funding. So I say that when you decide where to collect grant proposals you're setting up certain conversations for your teams to have. And so this just presents another option of the kinds of conversations that you may be able to set up for them. Do you have any questions about these organizations or how they fit in and how you decide if you should be thinking locally or thinking about these or doing some of both? All right, I got a thumbs up, 2 thumbs up, all right. Great. So another big, very influential part of the program are site visits or, at minimum having some contact with the nonprofits that you are learning about. So when you get to the point of site visits, your team should have already reviewed at least 3 grant proposals. Again, the target is 5 to 6. And sorry, the target number of organizations to contact is 5 to 6 in order to make sure that you have at least 3 grant proposals for the teams to review, so that they can do some real, thoughtful work understanding a couple of organizations. Task 5 focuses on having your teams understand the grant proposals and getting them ready for site visits. And a typical site visit is around an hour and includes the following: a 20 or so minute presentation from a development professional at the organization about the organization in general and the specific project. It includes a chance for teams to ask questions, hopefully about the information that they received in the grant proposal and whatever they've just seen at the organization. And it includes a tour of the site or the project. It generally does not include a volunteer experience. If you're thinking about including volunteerism in some way into this program, or service learning, I'm happy to talk with you about how to do that in a thoughtful way. But again, we're focusing here on the real adult grant making process that an adult foundation would do. During during the site visit, some team foundations choose to encourage their teams to dress a little nicer. You know, maybe they put on their Shabbat clothes at camp or whatever it may be, because we want them to understand that to have a feeling of real empowerment. They have real money to give away to these organizations, and we want them to present themselves as such in the nonprofit world. So that's one way that you may be able to create that feeling for teams. The reason why CTFN promotes this idea of going on site visits is really encapsulated in this quote here. We heard from an 8th grade camper at Green Lake that going on site visits was the most meaningful experience because I actually got to see the operations going on. Seeing something on paper is okay, but seeing it with your own eyes gives you a real wake-up call. So I like to share that quote to understand the meaning that it often has to teams. Before we move on, I also want to share that it's really important that following the site visit, there's time for the teams to unpack their experience, to have some kind of debrief, and to be able to do that, you know, directly after and before they begin a conversation about where to actually give that money. It's an important part of being able to contextualize the whole experience before they move on to the next step. And so I'd recommend that if you're not going to have time to do that back at your camp, you ask the organization to have some time in their setting, in their boardroom or wherever you're meeting with them, to have that experience without the professional there, just to make sure that you've kind of hit all those pieces, including the debrief. And you can also see on this slide just a note about preparation. You know, when you're taking your teams out of camp, you need to make sure that you're coordinating with all the appropriate people, that you've got your buses lined up, that all the folks that work with your campers during the day know that they're not going to be there, and that also you prep the team for what this means. And so especially in the case of younger campers, although I think you're both working with campers on the older range, what that prep looks like maybe who's going to be the person that stands up in the beginning of this meeting and kind of introduces the group. What questions do you have about the grant proposals, and who's going to ask those questions? So it may mean coming in with a list or a plan for what they're going to say. You know, I've even heard of team foundations preparing their teams to shake the hand of an adult because it's just not an experience that they're used to. So, you know, take into account who your teams are, what their background is, how old they are, and what kind of prep they need to go into this, you know, being able to make it a meaningful experience, which includes being able to ask thoughtful questions and to present themselves as, you know, empowered and responsible grant makers. Any questions on site visits, or, you know, we call it boldly site visits, but meetings with a representative, we could call it as well. All right. Great. So another piece of the grant making process that we, you know, really promote here and think is important to go over is the concept of building consensus. One of the explicit learning goals of this program is to make decisions through consensus. And so consensus is a mutual agreement among members of a group where all legitimate concerns of the individual have been addressed. And during consensus, the ideas, opinions, and concerns of all the group members are heard. Generally, it is not making decisions by vote, but instead making decisions through a conversation where everyone feels comfortable with the end result. I was once in a team foundation meeting, actually at a camp team foundation, where the teams decided where to give their grant. And as the group discussed the process afterwards, one of the teams said, I didn't really care that my favorite organization wasn't chosen because at least I got to tell everyone what I thought. And this was like, I was like, yes, you're like the poster child. This is the whole idea behind consensus. So, you know, I just want to highlight the importance of the staff who's running this part of the program, you guys and whoever else may be involved, really understanding the concept of consensus before you go in to try to teach it to teams. And it really can be tricky to teach and implement without experience in it. So I would challenge you, especially if you're working with a bigger team, like the CIT director and some other staff, et cetera, that you might practice using consensus and facilitating a decision using this model among yourselves in order to prepare for teaching the teams in this way. I mentioned before that it can really be a good leadership tool for staff as well. And do remember that making a decision through consensus is time consuming. So, you may have noticed that there are 8 tasks, but we recommend that you spend 15 hours of the program. So it doesn't mean that each task corresponds to 1 hour or 2 hours necessarily. This is one of the places where you need more time. If you're deciding between 5 organizations, you probably want to leave about 2 hours for a really good conversation using consensus. So any questions about consensus? And that's also a place where we have lots of other resources on our website if you want to understand more about it. Great. So the final task that concludes our grant making discussion. So having heard that was the area that you felt least comfortable, is there any other are there any other questions I didn't answer or anything you're wondering about the grant making pieces? Okay. So the final task we call celebration and sharing. And at this point in the process, your campers will have made their final decisions and you'll be about to send the grant checks and the thank you and yes rejection letters, which can be hard, but is necessary, to the organizations. And I just want to stress the importance of this final task. I think it's easy when we get to the end of something that's long and sometimes challenging to say we did it and to move on. But as educators, it's really our responsibility to make sure that we don't just move on to the next thing, and instead we really provide a space for recognition and reflection about the experience. It's really crucial to your campers' learning. And so reflection doesn't have to mean sitting in a circle and sharing one thing that you liked about the program, et cetera. And it doesn't have to be just a personal evaluation, which I'll also provide a sample of if you'd like to have your campers evaluate the experience. But task 8 actually has 18. I love that it turned out to be 18, but it was not intentional. Ways that your campers can creatively reflect on their experience. Everything from utilizing the camp radio station to writing a book for younger campers to creating a program for younger campers. So I just want to stress that it's important to leave time for this task in your schedule to wrap up this summer-long or month-long experience that your campers have had. All right. So, one important thing that we've learned along the way is that we also need to make sure that we are being responsible grant makers and that we're teaching teams how to be responsible in their dealings with nonprofits. So in your role, you and your teams will need to send notification letters to all the nonprofits that submitted grant applications, whether or not they received grants. And so JTFN also has examples in the appendix section of grant acceptance and denial letters. And it's up to you to really send those in a timely manner and ideally to include the teams in sending those letters so they understand, all aspects of this process. And I'll just push that as representatives of your camp, which are organizations that you care and love and have spent many years working with, the reputation of your camp depends on doing this in a responsible way. So we hope that that you do so, and that this program, along with all the other aims, also helps you build relationships with nonprofits in your local community and leaves them with a great feeling about your camp. And then, also a reminder that any organizations that are receiving the funding to make sure that that acceptance letter comes along with a check. Some some year-round organizations actually have as their celebration a grant ceremony where they invite the organization receiving the grant to come and receive it in a public forum. And so that's, especially Barry as a day camp, something that might actually be an option for you, which could be really cool. So you can consider that. All right. So that is really the bulk of the material that we're going to cover today. So before we move on to next steps, we'll cover next steps and then see if there are any questions. So the next step is, if you haven't already, to work with your camp administrator to finalize the Team Foundation schedule within the camp calendar, to schedule time during staff orientation to inform the other staff about this program, and to identify 5 or 6 local nonprofits, distribute those RFPs, and secure at least 3 grant proposals. And those things will really get you going for your summer. And, are important to do, like I said, before the campers come, because we know how busy camp can get. So now you have that list. And so hold on 1 minute.